All right, folks. Confession time here at the Stephen Kingdom. Here goes. Stephen King is my favorite writer. Oh, that feels so good to get off my chest. But if a wormhole opened up, right, and say somehow sucked Stephen King out of existence, I'd argue that these three writers I had a chance to speak with, they come pretty close to filling his formidable shoes. I'm talking about Stephen Graham Jones, Paul Tremblay, and Richard Chizmar, all of whom are excellent writers in their own right. And for three guys whose job it is to just sit alone in a dark,
empty room, staring into the endless void that is the blank page, well,
when the subject of Stephen King came up, they became some chatty Cathys. Our first memory of Stephen King is a lot like our first kiss. We remember when it was, we remember where it was, and it was a generally horrifying experience for everyone involved. Vivian, if you're out there, I had no idea braces could do that to the human tongue.
My first memory of Stephen King is of reading something. I guess I was 16 years old. This must have been 88. It could have been 89. But I somehow come home with the Tommyknockers hardback, big old book. And I think I bought the book because I saw that word Tommyknockers and I didn't know what that meant. So picked it up. It looked fun. I was reading a lot of science thrillers at the time. I thought this might be in the vein of those science thrillers. And I ended up staying up all night long reading that book. It terrified me, it just chilled me to the bone. And it thrilled me too. I think that's something that horror can do. It can make you afraid, but also make you reach out with part of yourself. And Tommyknockers did that for me, and it still does. I like that novel a lot. After that, it was, I had so much catching up to do. And I'm probably still not completely caught up, but I bet I've read, King's probably got plus 60 novels. I bet I've read 53 of them, something like that.
Much different than a lot of other writers. My first exposure was movies, and I was a child and a teenager into the 80s. And I was sort of like a math geek. That was my best subject at the time. So my first exposure to Stephen King were the adaptations, the movies. The first time I tried to read one of his books was when I was 18. I just had serious spinal fusion surgery, and I was going to be stuck in the house all summer, mostly alone because, my siblings would be out, my parents would be working. It's like, I'm going to try to read it, this, the big giant book. I'm not exaggerating. I read the first chapter and I threw the book across the room. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be stuck in the house all summer, terrified out of my mind. Because my old house had a creepy basement and we had to go down to get food sometimes down there. I was like, no, I'm not doing it. Pennywise would be down there.
Hi, Georgie. Aren't you going to say hello?
4 years later, I'm just about to graduate college. And for my 22nd birthday, my girlfriend, who was a big Stephen King fan, bought me The Stand right after we graduated college. And she's my wife now. And when I read The Stand, I just inhaled it. And I was like, oh. And I went away to grad school for a master's degree in math, actually, for 2 years. But while I was up in grad school doing the long distance relationship thing, I had a lot of time on my hands. So I read all the Stephen King that I could get my hands on.
I'm one of 5 children and a big family of readers. So I was surrounded by books growing up. I'd go to the library and that's where, I was picking up Edgar Allan Poe and anything about unexplained mysteries and Bigfoot and UFOs. And so it all kind of played hand in hand. And then I got into the Twilight Zone.
You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
And at some point, Salem's Lot, entered my life really early on. And I read that and then I picked up everything from Steve that I could find and kind of just buried myself in that. And it just all spilled over. It's Steve's books kind of encompassed all of the things I was interested in. I grew up in a small town. A lot of his books are set in small towns. And then I was always interested in kind of the unexplained and the dark side of things. So yeah, we're just kind of a natural match. And, I still have Stephen King hardbacks that were given to me for Christmas by my sisters, inscribed inside, you're going to love this one, that kind of thing. So yeah, pretty much the whole family.
Lewis is here to introduce the next segment. It's about what makes Stephen King such a successful writer. It's about a lot more than... Well, as it turns out, it's more than just scaring the pants off of us, although he certainly does that. It's about his compelling characters. No, Lou. No. Don't knock that over. Don't knock that over, or you're going to be in this again. I'm going to make you be a star. Come here. It's writing interesting and compelling characters. Not unlike Lou. I think he disagrees. Lou. This is Meriwether Lewis, and he is a character.
Talking about that character-centric angle, that is definitely something I learned from Stephen King. If you look at his novels, like if you do them, I don't know, if you apply statistics to them, he'll probably spend the first, 28, 32% of every novel basically saying, meet this character. This is this character's situation. This is their context. This is their issues. This is what's important to them. And after that, then he drops them into the meat grinder, and it's just a roller coaster after that, of course. But what I learned from Stephen King, from reading Stephen King, is that horror is not about propping up carving dummies and knocking them down. It's about putting real people into dangerous teeth. And the real people is the important part, really.
It's sort of like weird to describe to someone like, oh, I love that. That feels like this could happen. But what's happening is actually really horrible and scary. But I don't know, there's this appeal to the idea of it being rooted in realism. So I think, Stephen's stories feel like there's a truth there, like there's something real there, that if this supernatural thing were to happen, this is what it would look like. I don't know. And, now that I'm older as a writer, I'm sort of fascinated in, okay, so how are these characters going to react to this terrible thing that's been revealed in the story?
People ask me all the time, but what is it about his work that does it for you? And I just think, he's writing about people that I know, or people that I would like to know, or people that I'm so grateful that I don't know, but they're all real to me. And, I'm transported to those worlds. And you know what? That's cheap entertainment. $25-$30 for a hardcover to take you, someplace else. It's a lot cheaper than a plane ticket.
That's, sort of the magic of Stephen's fiction is not only how much time you spend with the characters, but sort of how instantly he's able to draw these characters that are recognizable. It's not aristocratic, it's not rich people. It's, here's a people that I might meet at the grocery store or certainly in my neighborhood. And that was definitely a draw to me.
There's always kind of I guess you could call it a working class sensibility to it. Like when his characters have money problems, it doesn't feel like the editor in his brain said, oh, they need to be under some strife. It feels like he understands what those money problems are like. He doesn't have money problems anymore, but he understands what it's like to be digging in the couch for one more dime so you can buy a dollar burger down the road. And that really connected with me, and it connects with me still in all of his books.
You'd be hard-pressed to find a writer who isn't influenced by Stephen King in some way, and it just so happens that these three writers owe a lot of their career success to Stephen King.
I tell people all the time, without Stephen King, there would be no, Cemetery Dance publications. There would be no, all my stories and stuff. I'd probably be, writing for a newspaper somewhere. Somewhere around year 2, I think, I got a really nice postcard from his assistant, which he gave me a promotional blurb that said something like, Cemetery Dance is one of the best. I read it as soon as it comes in. So yeah, for me, that was like, oh my goodness. And then in 1991, it was year 3, his agent, Chuck Farrell, who I had no idea who Chuck Farrell was. He sent me an original King story and said Steve wanted to know if I wanted to print it, called Chattery Teeth. And the interesting thing about that is, because I had no idea who Chuck Farrell was, I think year 3, we were probably pulling in 300-400 submissions a month. So to me, an envelope with Chuck Farrell on it from New York just looked like any other of those 300 or 400 submissions. So it sat in a pile in the bottom of my closet for about 6 weeks. Until I got a postcard from Chuck Farrell saying, hey, I represent Stephen King, and he sent you this, he wanted you to look at this story. Wondering if you had a chance to look at it yet. So yeah, I remember that day well, going and tearing through the slush pile to find this brand new story from Stephen King. And so, right from the beginning, that was year 2 and 3. I think he recognized that, I was young enough and dumb enough and passionate enough to stick with this, and that it was, a real love for me, as opposed to something I was, trying to do to make a buck or whatever, which definitely was not doing back then. His work has been, if I look back in my past and I find, 2 or 3 or 4 stepping stones that were crucial, that came at the right time, at the right place in my life, that led me to what I'm doing now. It's interesting because, Stephen King was a part of all of those.
Yeah. So with The Head Full of Ghosts was my first horror novel. Like, I'd written a few novels prior that wasn't horror. Like most horror authors, like, let's try to get a book to Stephen King. And obviously he gets sent so many books. And his assistant, who was very nice, was like, these books get put in a room. He sort of walks by, there's hundreds of books. He may or may not take it. But unbeknownst to me, a couple of friends, other writers, or in the publishing industry who are friends of Stephen, had read A Head Full of Ghosts and recommended it to him. And I heard about that like maybe midsummer of 2015. So I'm like, oh, maybe he'll read it. Nothing happened. So now like the summer's gone, school's approaching. I'm still a high school math teacher, which is the real horror, I suppose. And then, that late August, I just happened to be home and my phone just started blowing up with other people who saw that Stephen King had tweeted about A Head Full of Ghosts. A Head Full of Ghosts, scared the living hell out of me. I'm not easy to scare. I'm not ashamed to admit that, like when I saw that tweet, like I got teary-eyed. I became a reader, never mind a writer, because of Stephen King. I think how it was phrased too just really resonated with people, like how he put it, gave A Head Full of Ghosts really a second life, and it has helped the book immeasurably. So, I could never thank him enough for his support for that book and some others as well.
In a larger sense, I think the lesson we can all take from Stephen King is to do good in the world. I think he legitimately tries to make the world a better place. It's not that he like leverages his platform or his celebrity status or anything. I think he just wants the world to be better, and he sees things that are wrong with it, so he calls them out. And we should all be so bold, I think.
When you think of Stephen King, or any other horror writer for that matter, you're probably picturing some kind of spooky loner, some kind of goblin-esque figure sitting alone in a dank basement just with his gnarled, uncut fingernails clacking away at a typewriter. But would you believe it that Stephen King and a lot of other horror writers are actually just normal, nice folk?
People ask, because they say, well, he's been doing it for so long. Why do you think he does it for so long? And I'm like, well, he does it because he genuinely loves it. That's the cool thing about it is, he's got all the money he needs. He has all the fame he needs and all the acclaim and the awards that anyone could hope for. But it's not why he started doing it. And it's not why he's still doing it in the 70s, and that's a really admirable thing. I think he loves the process of creating and writing. So, he wakes up and he does it every day.
I don't think every Stephen King fan is a horror fan. There are millions of Stephen King fans. Not all those millions are horror fans, if that makes sense. I think if there were, then, I don't know, horror novels would be selling not as well as Stephen, but, a lot more copies. So it's just, he's almost like his own genre. Obviously he does so many different types of stories. It was just every time it's like, wow, this is totally different. And then, the deeper you get into his canon, it's like, oh, here's different seasons where here were, Shawshank Redemption. That isn't, really a horror story at all. And then other ones are just, full blown in your face horror stories. For someone with that backlist, it's just an incredible experience to be able to read them for the first time. But for me, it always felt like this amazing act of discovery.
What does Stephen King say? It's some interview where he gets asked, how do you sleep at night? And he says, I sleep fine because I give my nightmares away, and that's what I found working in the horror community for all these years. Some of the best people I've known, they're in horror. I remember once I was crossing an intersection in a car with Joe Lansdale, and a homeless man was pushing a bike across the intersection, really crowded place, big city. And the homeless man fell down. He had a bad knee, it looked like, and he just tumbled over. And before he hit the ground almost, Joe Lansdale was out the car and running to help that guy, And I think so many horror writers are like that. They care about the world, and they care about the world enough that they want to make it scary and exciting too.
For me, it's been dream come true stuff, and I'm honored to have a genuine friendship with them. And yeah, that's just kind of knock your head against a tree a little bit and say, what did I do to deserve this? But I'm not going to ask that question. I'm just going to roll with it.
Well, there you have it. Stephen Graham Jones, Paul Tremblay, and Richard Chizmar, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. And folks, if you haven't read any of the work by these fine gentlemen, it's worth checking out. Believe me, there's a reason why Stephen King has written favorable blurbs or favorable tweets about these fine gentlemen and their work. It's not something I'm jealous about at all. Would it be nice to have Stephen King write a tweet about you? Yeah, sure. Yeah. But does it make you feel less valid as a writer if he doesn't? No.